Will you please go live? Thank you. Thank you. Urgh. I have spent the last 8 minutes trying to go live. Unfreaking believable. Actually, longer than 8 minutes. Last 14 minutes trying to go live. Trying to get something here going. Urgh. Dang it. All right. Good morning. Let's see here. I got tires already here. Retro's already here. All right. No, I did. You're okay. Let's see here. Old man Naps, you're right. They are the great. Okay, docking my pay. No. uh, if only. If only. Okay, and my computer just got unplugged from power. Thank God I got a battery backup. Guys, I don't know what the hell's going on here this morning. Okay, and Epic's time has not been doing me any favors. You know, one of the most important things to I'm back. If you think about judicial nominees are the most important, are one of the most important nominations or things that a president does. Because once they're in office, unless they do something so egregious, so far out of the norm, so far out of what the law allows. I mean, and I'm talking about a judge like the most egregious thing I've heard of a judge doing that actually caused them to get in a lot of trouble was a judge out of West Virginia that personally took it was in a divorce case, personally took the ex-wife along with sheriff's deputies and bailiffs to the ex-husband's house and personally escorted them in and searched the man's house for things that the ex-wife wanted. Refused to recuse herself, a whole laundry list of things. And the Supreme Court and they she I believe ended up retiring before she lost her pension, which I still think she should have lost her pension. But I mean, you really have to go way far out to lose your. And I need to double that this is. Am I even being heard by anybody? Okay, get the caps lock off. Okay, so let me see if anybody. Okay, Retro says he's hearing me. All right, that's great. Biden has really bollocksed up a lot of nominees. Okay, and I've played some of them in the past, but this latest group has been, well, we will just let some of the what happened at the hearings. We'll go with what's gone on here at the hearings.
Multiple counts. I believe production of child pornography carries 30-year maximums. So I believe we couldn't have asked for life based on the
Okay.
statutes.
All right. Are you familiar with the Carpentino case?
I am, Senator.
Okay. This involves a man who is accused and convicted of raping a disabled 14-year-old who is deaf, I believe. Does that ring a bell?
Not deaf, but hearing impaired,
Hearing
certainly.
impaired. But disabled, right? 14-year-old.
14-year-old hearing impaired.
And the person that raped her had previously served 13 years for sexually abusing other minors. Is that correct?
I don't know if it was 13 years. I take your word he did serve a prior sentence for a state sex offense.
Against minors.
I believe so.
Okay. And you recommended 405 months. Is that correct?
I believe so, and I think the judge sentences him slightly lower than that.
Yeah. Okay. There's a note.
405 months. Let me break out my calculator here. All right. How long of a 405 divided by 12? That equals 33 years, 33 and 3/4 years for child molestation of a disabled child. And it's not his first time. He had already done a 13-year sentence here, according to Lindsey Graham here. 33 years. Why not life? Why not life? Life with no parole. Why not ask for that? Absolutely max out the time. Now we'll get to unfortunately we're not going to be able to get to what the judge actually sentenced him, but why? But as a prosecutor, you're recommending this guy is a serial abuser of children. Yeah. Physical castration is not enough, and they don't do physical castration. It has to be chemical castration, which are the same pills that they feed young boys who believe they are trans. All right. So no, as far as I'm concerned, it's not just chopping off the balls, not just chopping off the gonads. Leave them a stump. Leave them enough of a stump to pee out of, and that's it. Cut the penis completely off. Leave them measure how big their fingers are, their thumb and their forefinger. Give it a 1/4 inch past that so they don't pee on their fingers. And then chop off the rest.
Note in a memo here. The sentence requested here will capacitate the defendant until he is in his 60s. Hopefully by that time, the danger the defendant presents will have subsided. Did you write that?
Either I or my colleague did.
Well, it was given under your name,
I
your office.
I understand what you're,
Is it your testimony before this committee that you age out in terms of being a sexual predator against children?
I think that certainly that there's an argument that as you get older in age, that's possible. That was certainly a guideline sentence that we requested in that case.
So, according to this guy, at age 60, you no longer have a sex drive. Let me disabuse this gentleman of that thought, of that belief, of that whatever. And being as somebody at age 64, no, there is not a diminishing of the sex drive once you reach 60 years old. Okay? And that's about, as personal of information as I'm going to give out. Now, this isn't a Supreme Court. This here's federal judge, Tyre. They're wanting to make him a federal judge. And he believes at age 60, you no longer have a sex drive. Well, given the gray hair, the grays on his head there, he is approaching 60. Now, maybe his sex drive has dropped, and maybe he's got to use that little blue pill, right? But that's not every male.
Which is a
What,
very long.
what information did you have to suggest that was possible?
Look, it is challenging to predict what's going to happen to someone 405
Don't you think the
months from now.
past is the best indication of the future? The man was served 13 years in jail, got out, raped a 14-year-old girl, and you believe that if he got to his 60s, it'd probably be okay.
And he received a very long sentence.
Well, the point is, can you give me information about some source that says that over time, your propensity to do this to children goes down?
I think there's some evidence that
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think there's some evidence. Where do you get this evidence from? Huh? Just tell me. Where do you get this evidence from? Okay. Now, another one of my favorite senators for questioning is Kennedy. I just love Kennedy. He doesn't go highfalutin. He doesn't he's just right there. So let's see what he's got to say here. Okay. Why isn't this sharing? All right, let me try this again. All right. And hopefully this has gone through this time. No, it's not. Oh, man, what is going on here? Let's see. Stop sharing. Stop sharing. Come back over here. Oh, it looks like it just started to share when I canceled it. Okay. So let's get back over to here and we'll start Mr. Ted Kennedy. Okay. Ah, StreamYards, what are you doing to me today? Ah, finally.
When you advised. The companies referenced, Huawei and others. You were at Sidley,
Yes, that's right, sir.
and when a client comes to Sidley, you have to fill out a form that says, you know, here's my client name, here's my mailing address for business purposes, and here are my political beliefs. Is that the way it works?
There's definitely a client intake process. I don't remember all the particulars of
I
it.
mean, big law it's kind of like who can pay the freight, right?
That's an aspect of the
Okay.
intake process, I'm sure.
I understand. Professor, I'm looking at a letter dated March 16, 2020. It's a letter to Governor Lamont in Connecticut. The title of it is Urgent Action Needed to Protect Individuals in Connecticut's Prisons and Jails from Coronavirus 19 Pandemic. Did you sign?
Let's take a guess here what he wants to do to protect prisoners during the coronavirus. Is he wanting to uh, beef up the security of the prison to ensure that anyone possibly infected does not enter the prison, a vendor, a guard, or somebody, and to segregate those who are infected with COVID away from the healthy patients, to ensure that the prisoners have sanitation devices and such to ensure that they're just being safe. Yeah, I mean, remember, what we knew then versus what we know now. Is that what he's wanting to do, to step up policies within the prison to make certain that the prisoners are kept safe? Hey, Badger, good morning to you. Or is he looking more at wanting to do something stupid like release every prisoner that can be released back out into the wild?
Sign that letter.
So I don't recall sitting here today, Senator.
Here's your signature. Here it is back here. Why didn't you turn this over to us when you were asked to submit documents?
So Senator, I made every effort to search for everything that I had ever signed. That's not a letter I remember, but I will certainly take a look at that. And
We found it was with a search on the internet.
so I apologize, Senator. I apologize.
In
that I
your
missed
letter to
that.
the governor, here's what you say. As they stand, prisons and jails are detrimental to public health and human rights and disproportionately harm marginalized communities.
Oh wow, this woman, as they stand. That's not saying, in this circumstance of a pandemic. That's just being a prisoner. To the prison system inside the United States today, under best of the circumstances, health-wise, prisons are detrimental. Prisons are detrimental
To public health and human rights and
to human rights. So by locking up those who violate the laws, commit crimes against the citizens of the United States, that is a violation of human rights. Okay?
disproportionately harm marginalized communities.
And disproportionately harm marginalized communities. Now, who would be these marginalized communities? We know what they mean. People of color, LGBTQ plus. God, that's a shame. I've been saying that so many times I actually hasn't come off my tongue automatically. I don't even have to think about it anymore. And yeah, and women, and women, you know,
including black, brown, indigenous, and other communities of color, immigrants, people with mental
oh, immigrants, people who've come to our country, and most of them illegally, and commit crimes. So the prison system affects them negatively the most. Wow.
illness, people with disabilities, people in the LGBTQ plus community, people who use drugs, people engaged in sex work and street economies, and people experiencing houselessness and poverty.
You know, in other words, the prison system negatively affects everybody, except if you're straight and white. Everybody who commits crimes negatively affects everybody who commits crimes, except for straight white people. Wow, did not realize that. Did not realize that at all. I wonder what there is about being straight and white where prison doesn't negatively affect you, according to this woman. I mean, she just read off the whole laundry list of people that need to be protected by the laws, you know. Immigrants, mostly illegals, LGBTQ, mentally disabled. Now, mentally disabled people who are in prisons do require, you know, special assistance. A lot of times, mentally disabled are not really aware of the crimes that they're committing. Now, people with disabilities, now, okay, I'm one of these people with physical disabilities, and I really should hope that I get held to the same standard of the laws as everybody else is held to. You know, I mean, I do my best not to break any laws. But this woman who wants to be a federal judge, she's a professor, um, believes that prison systems not only violate human rights, but violate the human rights of everybody except straight white people.
So if you believe that about our prisons, how are you going to ever sentence somebody to prison?
So, Senator, I will need to take a look at that letter, and I apologize that that's not something I found to hand to this committee.
You know,
Is it any wonder that she did not find, quote unquote, did not find that letter? You know, because as Kennedy says here, if you believe that prisons are so bad for everybody, except straight white people, how could you sentence anybody to go to prison?
I'm not denying you said that.
I do need to see the letter to see the context, because again, it's not something I remember adding my name to. I can assure you,
right.
Did you sign so many letters to the governor of your state that you can't remember which ones you signed and which ones you didn't sign? I mean, I remember the letters that I signed going to and emails going to my elected representatives. And I keep a copy of them. I've got them on my hard drive. I've got a copy of every email that I've sent out to them. So, don't you do the same? Don't you keep copies of what you send out to your elected representatives, especially when you're asking them to do something?
Senator.
And you also say, first, you call on Governor Lamont to release everybody in jail. Is that right? Because of the coronavirus?
So again, Senator, I would need to see that letter in front of me. It certainly was not,
You can find it just put your name into Google. You'll find it in about 3 nanoseconds.
I will, Senator. I can assure you that I
You said in your letter, Professor, we call on Governor Lamont, state of Connecticut, and all Connecticut jurisdictions to immediate release to the maximum extent possible people incarcerated pre-trial and post-conviction. And then you go on to say, talking once again about our jails, the global COVID-19 pandemic is throwing into sharp relief the untenable state of our penal system and the need for sustained action to shrink its scale, shrink its size, and shrink its scope. You sound here like...
Who does she want in prison? Who does she want to go to jail? If she wants everybody to be, she wants to scale them down. She wants fewer prisons, smaller prisons. So who does she believe belong in prisons?
like the district attorney in San Francisco. If you believe that, how are you going to ever sentence anybody to jail, Professor?
I can assure you, Senator, that I understand the role of the judge and that I can assure you prison time is an appropriate sentence in
That's
many
not what
cases.
you say here.
Why is it every time one of these nominees gets caught holding a position that is in direct opposition to what they're supposed to do or what they're going to be required to do in the job that they're seeking as a federal judge, lifetime appointment, that they always sit there and say, well, I can assure you I will follow the rules as they are. I will follow the dictates of the Supreme Court and the appeals courts above me. I will do this. I will do that. When they hold a year's worth of advocacy against what the standards are, but for some reason they sit there and swear up and down that they're going to follow the rules that they believe are wrong. Now, if I were to be asked to join an organization that I believe is totally wrong, that everything they do is wrong, would I really want to join that organization? Or would I join it in the hopes that someday I would get advanced far enough in the leadership that I would be able to make the changes that I believe should be made? Be that mole. That's a lot of these judges. That's the way people that want to be judges. Let's see, Professor Sarah French Russell. As Monkey says, pick one last name. Why do you want to become a judge when you don't want to send anybody to jail? When you believe that there's too many people in jail?
Here to the governor, you wrote the governor. This isn't some DoorDash delivery guy. You wrote the governor of your state 3 years ago.
So again,
When you
Senator,
were in law school.
Senator, I would need to look at the letter. It sounds like it was written at the height of the pandemic where governors were looking for.
You also wrote the governor, you said, people over the age of 55 are at the greatest risk for COVID-19, but also pose the least public safety risk to our communities. People in this age group can and should be released immediately to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. You think the governor just, if you're over the age of 55, he should let everybody go?
So this nominee, previous nominee feels that anybody over the age of 60 won't commit sex crimes, and this nominee says anybody over 55 won't commit any crimes. Wow. Ages must. You know, she don't. Yeah, yeah. You're a dangerous fella up there, Retro.
No, Senator, that's not a position.
That's what you said.
Okay.
Here
and
it is, biggest house.
Again, Senator, I will look at that letter. I can assure you that.
Find it on Google, Professor.
Now, okay. Now I will say this, Kennedy. You should have had a copy of that letter there to hand her so that you could slap her in the face with it. You should have had a copy of that letter that you could have had an aide hand to her, and let her verify it right there in front of you.
You also say Governor Lamont should issue an executive order to direct the state's attorney offices and law enforcement entities, including the town and city police departments, and any federal law enforcement entity operating within the state to immediately cease adding to the incarcerated prison population given the high risk of infection posed by the population increase. You ask the governors to tell every law enforcement official in the state to stop arresting people.
That's exactly what she just said. Stop arresting people. I don't care what the crime is. Don't arrest them. Nobody gets arrested. Nobody goes to jail. Nobody goes to jail. The jail's empty out. Hey, COVID solved.
Putting them in jail, didn't you?
So again, Senator, I have to look at that letter. I do think there were modifications that the governors were making around the country to respond to the
You also
pandemic.
had an opinion in your letter about, can I have another 30 seconds, Mr.? You had an opinion in your letter about immigration. You said immigration detention poses the same health risk to jails and prisons, and Connecticut law enforcement must stop feeding people into the unsafe and inhumane immigration detention system.
Now, remember, these are people that have entered the country illegally. They violated our laws to start with, and she wants them to walk free. She doesn't want them held in any kind of detention. Because we don't put people in detention that didn't enter the country illegally. You know, they flew in or came in via a boat or somehow and crossed the border from Mexico, legally crossed the border from Mexico, or legally crossed the border from Canada with visas and passports and had money in their pockets, a bank account with cash in it. And they were able to, legally enter the country for however long that their visas were for. But this judge wants those that come across the border illegally to be set free. No detention camp for you. Just set free, walk across the border. You're free as a bird.
And you say Governor Lamont should release all individuals currently in state custody who are awaiting transfer to ICE custody, and the governor should declare a moratorium on all such future transfers. How, if somebody is in our country illegally and commits a crime, are you going to put them in jail if you believe this about immigration?
Senator, I can assure you, were I so fortunate to be confirmed, I would treat crimes
That's not
seriously.
what this letter says, Professor, and it was 3 years ago. Wasn't when you were in law school, and you didn't turn it over to us. We had to find it on our own.
Senator, the chair has been generous in time. I think you.
Now, I will give Durbin this. As much as I dislike him, and I dislike Durbin with nearly every fiber of my being, as he does give Kennedy here a fair amount of time on a constant basis to ask and answer his questions. So, but that is the type of people. Again, we've got a nominee that believes that people over the age of 60, men over the age of 60, women over the age of 60, no longer have a libido, no longer want to commit sex crimes against anybody, but especially against children. We've got one here that says anybody over 55 isn't a criminal or won't be a criminal, and illegals shouldn't be held in detention, and wants the prisons to be emptied out. And these are people that this administration want to have in the court systems, lifetime appointments. Okay, we're going to try another judicial nominee here. Let's see if I can get this. See if we can make this work again. All right, Marsha Blackburn. She's a pretty she's above average when it comes to questioning. Okay. Let's see here. Yep. All right, and I am still waiting. There it goes. Thank you. All right, let's hear this one. Marsha Blackburn.
Mr. Kimbrough, that you now have a congressional edict to be good to your mama. I think that is just awesome. We mamas like things like that. We're also informed by looking at your records and reading your writings. And Judge Casaba, I want to come to you because as I looked at some of your readings and writings, your decisions, you seem to have an affinity for Marxism. And in a 1994 essay, you criticize the concept of private property. And I'm going to quote you here. You argued that, and I quote, property incites rebellion, end quote. And this is one of the many positive statements that you have made about Marxist approaches and Marxist policies, Marxism. And, you know, President Reagan, as I was reading some of your things that leaned toward Marxism, I thought of President Reagan's comments when he said that the March of Freedom and Democracy would leave Marxism on the ash heap of history, and that's exactly where it belongs, because Marxist regimes, as of 2023, have been responsible for the deaths of over 100 million people. So it disturbs me when I see this leaning to Marxism in your writings. So a yes or no question. Are you a Marxist?
No, Senator.
Okay. Will you right now disavow the tenets of Marxism that you have praised in some of your writings?
Senator, I have not praised Marxist ideas, and I would disavow any other system than that which is than that would be supported by our U.S. Constitution and our laws.
I appreciate your comment, but sir, in your writings, you have given the opposite opinion. But you've also made a number of concerning statements regarding sexuality and the disempowerment of women. Specifically, you've aligned yourself philosophically with a professor who has espoused the disturbing views that all heterosexual relationships are per se infused with violence and that all sexual acts should be viewed as rape. Not only is this view wrong and offensive, but also
Wasn't that Andrian Dworkin? I'm sure that was saying that all sex is rape. If I'm wrong, I'm sure somebody knows exactly who that was. You have got to be kidding on me. Tyre, that sucks. That absolutely sucks there, Tyre. Now, one thing I wish he had done was been a little more explicit in what he actually said in his writings that leads her to believe he's a supporter of Marxism. But given that he's the Biden nominee, it would not surprise me that he is a Marxist or has Marxism in his leanings.
Also, and perhaps more importantly, it undercuts the important work that is being done across this country to empower survivors of sexual assault. When you say that all sexual acts are rape, you delegitimize and silence women who actually are victims of sexual assault. So how can women possibly trust that they will be treated fairly in your courtroom given your disturbing views on this subject?
Senator, that law review article to which you're referring, I believe was published, I wrote in 1995. I did not align myself with those ideas. The law review article summarizes several different
We're
theories in
familiar
philosophy.
with the article. Do you regret citing these very concerning statements?
Senator, the description or summary of these different theories is not a subscription to or an attestation of the
Do
validity
you
of.
denounce the view that all women are per se disempowered by our system?
I do not ascribe to those theories that I was summarizing in that article. And I would also turn to my years of serving on the bench and treating all people
Okay,
fairly.
let me move on. I've got 30 seconds. I also was troubled by your involvement as the prosecutor in the Gonzalez case. Mr. Gonzalez was arrested for allegedly raping a 12-year-old little girl. The FBI eventually reviewed the media seized from his home and identified horrific images of child sexual abuse. The sentencing memo that you prepared, oh, this is for Mr. Smith. your sentencing memo, you outlined Mr. Gonzalez's heinous crimes. The images that were found on his phone were created in his home, in his own bedroom, with girls as young as 10 years old. And they found out he had parties. He would offer them illicit substances. He would then abuse them. And he did this multiple times over a 15-year period of time. It started in 1997, and still with all of that information, you went far below the guidelines. And in fact, for this repeat child abuser, you recommended a sentence of just over 10 years. And he had done this to kids for 15 years. So why did you do that?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I do recall the case of Mr. Gonzalez. That was a case that I believe I was assigned.
Okay, before we finish listening to this guy offer up his excuses, this is at least the 5th or 6th nominee that the Biden administration has put up that has gone very, very light on child sexual predators. People wanting to have child porn, people having sex with children, people drugging children, and go way below the legally allowed sentences. You know, I'm sorry, but when a child is involved, I don't believe in a upper limit on sentencing. And the lower limit should be set so high that they're in a wheelchair on oxygen and needing somebody to spoon feed them before they ever think about getting out of prison. Anybody, any chomo should never be allowed to walk out of prison on their own 2 feet, under their own power. But for so many of this administration's nominees, child abuse like this, child molestation is not punished. It's not punished strictly or heavily.
When I had just started in the office, I recognized immediately the seriousness of those offenses, and I believe I had Mr. Gonzalez prosecuted within a month or so of my having been assigned the case. When I make sentencing recommendations in court, especially as a new prosecutor in the General Crimes Unit in the Southern District of New York, I make those sentencing recommendations.
Okay. Well, the court rejected your recommendation. They went above you to 15 years and then gave him an additional 10 years of probation. This is something that is terribly concerning to me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm going to let
Okay, so this guy got 1 year of prison time for every year that he sexually molested a child. That doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound right. And probation, please. If he'd been given 45 years with no chance of parole or probation, that would be the lower limit of what I would feel would be correct. But no, I don't understand how sexually molesting a child. How can anybody sit there and say, well, 10 years is sufficient for 15 years worth of molesting children? For having 15 years worth of child porn made in your own home on your phone and computer. I don't understand how that goes. I don't understand it. The idea that somebody would do that. But these are the people that this administration is putting into office. Remember, these are lifetime appointees. I don't get it. I just don't get it. Now we're back to Mr. Kennedy. Like I said, this guy's one of my favorites.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge Casaby. I'm looking at an order you issued as a magistrate judge here, requiring the use of pronouns in your court.
Imagine that. You walk into a courtroom and the judge demands that you introduce yourself with your pronouns. Doesn't allow you to say what your pronouns are, but in writing says you have to introduce yourself with your pronouns. I was one of them. I was one of these. So when I say we, I include me. We thought that this phase 5 years ago was just a phase. And when these people got out into the real world, this kind of crap would stop. You know, it was just a phase that the college kids were going through. But no. Ramen. Did I miss Ramen? Yes, I did. Good morning, Ramen.
Do you require the use of pronouns, the declaration of one's pronouns in your court?
Senator, that may be referring to perhaps a trial management order or a scheduling order of some kind?
Yeah.
Uh,
No, it's a statement. You issued it. Here it is.
It's an invitation for people to identify their pronouns and or their honorifics.
Well, I'm looking at your requirement that you issued to all people in your court. You say, quote, when you introduce yourself in a meeting, you should say, my name is Judge Blank and my pronouns are blank. Is that right?
Senator, those were not requirements or rules. Those were
Wait a minute. Back. What do you mean they're not requirements or rules? What was it said here again in writing?
honorifics.
Well, I'm looking at your requirement that you issued to all people in your court. You say, quote, when you introduce yourself in a meeting, you should say, my name is Judge Blank and my pronouns are blank.
You should say. So that is a requirement. That's not saying you can say. Words have meanings. Words have a meaning. And when you say words, when you type out instructions, you give them to somebody, and you say, you should do this and you should do that. That's not giving them an option. You should do this.
Is that right?
Senator, those were not requirements or rules. Those were suggestions and
That was suggestion.
those were suggestions and invitations for people
Okay.
to use.
And you also,
It was a suggestion. Now, if he meant it as a suggestion, then he would say you, and then you may introduce your pronouns. You can introduce your pronouns, but not that you should introduce your pronouns. And this man wants to be a federal judge. He wants an elevation from a magistrate position to federal position.
in your directive, you say, quote, "I'd like counsel to introduce themselves, giving your full name and your honorific, such as Ms., MS period, Mix, or Mr., not Mrs. And if your client will be making an appearance, I ask you to please introduce them to the court by giving me their full name and their honorific, such as Ms., MS period, Mix, or Mr." In
Is there any doubt this judge is woke? Is there anybody's doubt? Is there a doubt in anybody's brain where this man's thought processes go as a judge? And how he would be most likely to rule on cases? I would be scared to death if I had to go and see a judge for any reason and I had him up there with that gavel and power over my life. Which, face it, every judge, when you're going before a judge, your life is potentially going to have a radical change to it.
quote. Is that right?
Senator, it's not a directive. Again, it's an invitation for people to
Oh, it's
introduce
an
themselves.
invitation.
Yeah.
Okay.
It didn't sound like a invitation to me. It sounded more like a directive. You should do this. You will do this. That's not a invite. That's that somebody can refuse.
All right. I'm looking at an article from the Oregon State Bar Bulletin from May of 2021. And I want to read one of your quotes. Quote, "We have to set aside conventional ideas of proof." Let me say that again. We have to set aside conventional ideas of proof, you said, when we are dealing with the personal and interpersonal work of equity, division, and inclusion. As a judge, I can appreciate appreciate the challenge of employing a different mode for understanding truth than that which most lawyers are accustomed to in our work, end quote. Did you write that?
That is a quote from that article.
Millions of Americans still haven't claimed their $540 per month from this stimulus program. And
So when we're dealing with
Okay, I think I'm back. All right, there we go. And let me try to get back to this over here. Is that back on there yet? Yes. All right. So let me back this up here a little bit.
accustomed to in our work, end quote. Did you write that?
That is a quote from that article.
So when we're dealing with equity, diversity, and inclusion, we should set aside conventional ideas of proof. Is that right?
In the larger context of interpersonal and personal relationships, the idea of being able to have a conversation with somebody,
Yeah, but you didn't talk about a conversation. You said proof.
it's in the context of having a conversation with somebody about the issue of their background and their
So
experience.
when the issue is equity, diversity, or inclusion, we should have a different set of proof. Is that right?
When it comes to the space in which people have interpersonal relationships with one another, the idea of respecting and dignifying each other with their experiences is an important part of.
So all issues have one set of proof, which has been handed down by our state Supreme Courts, our U.S. Supreme Court, except you think we ought to have a different set of proof when equity, diversity, and inclusion are at issue. Is that right?
In all of my years on the bench, Senator, I have applied the law, the rules of evidence, the
Okay.
case precedent.
Let me move on.
Okay, now this judge is saying that when it comes to DEI, we should have separate types. Okay, Tyre, yeah, I think I'm back. I'm hearing myself at least on through my cell phone, but yeah, this judge. When it comes to anything interpersonal, we need to look at DEI. All right, so and once again, I've said this before and I'll say it again. All right. The only people that it is legal and moral and just to be prejudiced, racial biased, uh, to ignore, to just absolutely crap upon are Christian, straight, white males. All right. They have 0 oppression points. Okay. A gay white male has got oppression points for being gay. A trans white male has got oppression points for being trans. A trans gay white male, well, they've got 2 oppression points. So under DEI, they get better and better treatment. And therefore, according to this judge, the bias goes in their favor more and more. A black female trans gay trans lesbian with amputee with PTSD and left-handed would probably max out on the oppression points. So anything that you did that negatively affected her, she didn't get her job that she was applying for. She didn't get whatever government handout that they was trying to get. Everything else, whatever, using the criteria this judge is laying out, she can do no wrong and is always going to be on the right end. When you start allowing DEI into the courtrooms, throw the law out. The law no longer matters. And that's what this judge wants to do. The laws no longer matter. And this is a judge that wants to be elevated to a federal bench. This is a judge that the Biden administration and the Democrats believe should be elevated to a federal bench. Unfreaking believable.
I'm looking at the notes you gave us from a speech you made in February 7, 2020. It's entitled Speech Reflections on Equity and Privilege to the Oregon Blacks in Government. You wrote, quote, "White, male, straight people allow privilege to remain in place," close quote. Did you say that? Did you write that?
Without looking at the specific
Here it
speech
is. You
here.
turned it in.
Well, if that's on the piece of paper, Senator, then I have no
Okay.
reason to
You
disagree.
also wrote, quote, "Privilege is incredibly similar to narcissistic personality disorder," close quote. Did you write that?
Without looking at everything in the context of that statement, it appears correct.
Okay. You wrote, quote, "The identity of Muslims also need to be normalized in a country that is so deeply Islamophobic." Did you write that?
Senator, I did. And what I'd also like to clarify is that in the context of my work on the bench, I have treated everybody equally without regard to their
I'm sorry, I
background.
just,
Yeah, it's always amazing how these judges sit there and say, these people who want to become federal judges sit there and say, it's like I said earlier, well, I have always treated people, I've always done this, or I promise I will always do that. Now, remember, he said that the country is deeply Islamophobic. Let's take a look at what is preached by some of these Muslims. And this is a Muslim imam. All right, here we go.
It is upon us to follow the rules set and his messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, without mushing them up, without compromise, without twisting them, and without changing them to fit in anyone's agenda. We follow Islam. And yes, in Islam, we do not hide from the fact that homosexuality under the Sharia, after being judged with the Quran and the Sunnah by an Islamic judge in an Islamic court in Islamic lands, is punishable by death. We should not hide away from this. It is the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal. The idea that being a homosexual is okay in Islam, being persistent on this major sin, being proud of it, calling to it, promoting it, making it permissible, going against the textual evidence from the Quran and the Sunnah is clear-cut kufr. And a person who does so has clearly apostated from the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Furthermore, for those sick individuals.
All right. So this judge
who want to change Islam and compromise and make it fit.
All right. So this judge here is trying to say that because we don't agree with this rhetoric, we are Islamophobic. Remember, under Sharia, which is what they want to rule the world with, gay people are taken to rooftops and taught how to fly. Okay.
I want to get through this. I'm going to run out of time. You also wrote, quote, I am disappointed about the way in which the founding fathers of this country perpetuated inequity, close quote. Did you write that?
In the context of the issue of slavery, that was something that I'd been considering.
In your notes you gave us from a speech on May 17th, 2023, does race matter? You said, quote, does race matter? Hell yes, close quote. You know that T-shirt at the Saturday markets, the one that says something like love, see no color, and it has all the colors of the rainbow all over it, and it's like a tie-dye shirt. Well, the first time I saw it, I said, how sweet. Then I got angry. If love doesn't see color, then I don't have allies, close quote. Did you say that?
Yes, and that was to explain that the work of equity is to help understand where people are coming from, not to ignore who they are.
So, of course, when you're using people's skin color to determine where they're coming from, under the, all whites are automatically racist. If you are white, you are border racist. You are an oppressor. If you're black or brown, you are automatically oppressed. Major League Football players being paid millions of dollars a year. They're automatically oppressed if their skin is black or brown. Same with NBA players. LeBron James is oppressed. Oprah Winfrey is oppressed. Now, it doesn't matter that she's worth billions of dollars, a couple $1 billion, almost $3 billion if I remember correctly. She is she's oppressed. Okay, The Rock is oppressed. Kamala Harris is oppressed. Sheila Jackson Lee, every member of the Black Caucus is oppressed in the Congress because their skin color. And every white person, even Senator Kennedy here, he is an oppressor. He is a racist because his skin color. Dick Durbin is a racist because he's white. That's what this man is saying. That's what DEI teaches.
And you also, yeah, no, I'm sorry. Can I have 30 more seconds? Judge, you seem to be obsessed with race and sexuality. I mean, you even go so far as to say that when race and sexuality and diversity and inclusion are at issue, we need a separate standard of proof in the United States federal judiciary. How are litigants going to be able to trust you?
Senator, that's not what I've said. There is
Sure
no
it is.
different
Here it is,
standard.
bigger than Dallas. I read it to you.
When you look
turned
at,
in these documents. I didn't go looking for them.
when
You
you look
seem
at,
proud of it.
as anyone who reviews my record on the bench,
I have.
thousands of cases.
I'm going to let you finish responding, and your time has expired, but go ahead.
The rule of law is an absolute for me. The work that I have done on the bench over the
That's
last
not what
16
you say.
the work that I've done on the
But
bench
that's
for-
not what you say.
Judge, finish your sentence.
the work that I've done on the bench in ruling over all the people's cases that have appeared in front of me from all backgrounds, of all faiths, you'll find that I have upheld the rule of law and upheld the precedent of our Constitution and our Supreme Court and the Ninth Circuit.
Well, if this chairman would give me time, I could go through the cases and prove that that's not the case.
Senator,
I just don't see how you can be a fair-minded judge.
Senator Booker.
It's amazing. Now I've only got another half hour on this that I can do. But Ted Cruz here, talking to the same judge, talking to the same nominee. You know, the same guy that wants to become elevated to the to a federal bench. Again, a lifetime appointment. And this is what he wants.
Judge Katsubai, I think your fellow nominees owe you a debt of gratitude because many Biden nominees have been extreme, but your record is so far out of the mainstream that you have attracted virtually all of the questions. I was particularly intrigued by your...
And see, that's the bad thing when they have 4 or 5 people sitting up there, nominees, and the senators only have 5 minutes to ask questions. And I brought that up yesterday. You know, I brought it up as far as when you're exerting your First Amendment right to go to a school board meeting or a town hall meeting, and they give you 2 or 3 minutes. When these nominees are sitting in front of the Senate for a hearing, and they're only given 5 minutes and 2 rounds, so a total of 10 minutes to ask questions. How can you properly question all 4 or 5 nominees that way? I don't understand, you know, this makes no sense to me that you can nominate somebody for 5 minutes or nominate someone and expect to be able to question them about, especially somebody like this judge, but any judicial nominee, any government nominee, especially one though that's going to get a lifetime appointment. Shouldn't the questioning be allowed to go as long as there are questions to be asked and answered? Now, should the same question be asked 40 or 50 times back to back to back? No. But each senator should be allowed to ask the questions that he wants, that he or she wants to ask. So there's going to be 4 nominees here, 4 other nominees, I believe, that are getting by without having many questions directed at them because of this one guy. And I know some people say, well, all the senators should get together and decide who's going to ask which judge which question. I don't agree with that either. Every senator should have the right to ask every nominee a question. And if that means that these Senate hearings go 12, 14, 18 hours over 5 or 6 days, so be it. Because we're talking about lifetime appointments. We're not talking about somebody who's going to be in an office for 2 years or 3 years or 4 years or for the term of the president. We're talking about people who are going to be sitting on that bench and making rulings until the day that they resign.
Your statement to Senator Blackburn that you said you are not, in fact, a Marxist. And then you said, and I wrote it down, I have not praised Marxist ideas. Now, as you know, in law, there is the fact of evidence. And so let's go to something you wrote, an article that is entitled Centralized Property Theory, in which you wrote, it begins, it's on the front page of your law school newspaper. You write, quote, intimate knowing, the lovers kissed, familiar and ever exciting, passionate transcendence. Beyond the physical exhilaration lies a burning light in our limbs, our hearts. Floating, flying, falling in every direction, amorphous and wonderful, time-stretching, space-curving, exquisitely explosive eros. And yet I timidly tremble every time. Now, somehow this is about property, which is not immediately evident as to why, but later in the article you write, you say, property is not simply a relationship between an owner and an object of ownership. Property is primarily a complex relationship between people and secondarily regards the objects people exploit. Historically, 3 paradigms have dominated European notions of property. Locke appealed to the notion that labor points to who has the right to exploit property. Bentham relied on utility to dictate who has rights based on how the property is exploited. And Marx was plainly disgusted with the alienation that property imposed and its establishment of an us and them and haves and have-nots. Each theory alone denies important components of human experience. Among them are the ability to work, the need for personal privacy and boundaries, and uniquely diverse desires which spin us all in differing life directions. However, the process towards integrating all 3 may provide a framework for relationships that enhances each unique self. The aspiration towards intimate knowing, the intimate knowing of oneself and others, is a creative struggle towards redefining property. What the hell does that mean?
Senator, when I...
There is
Now, oh, crap.
the fact of evidence.
No.
And so let's go to something you wrote.
Okay, now, I've never liked, or not going to say never liked. This guy out obviously graduated law school decades ago. Uh, when you go back to somebody's writings in law school, can you really still hold them to that same opinion 20, 30 years later? You can ask if they still hold that opinion. You can ask if they've changed it, the opinion on that issue. You can ask, that, but can you still accuse them of having that position? Because I know I wrote some pretty stupid stuff in my high school years. My senior year in high school, I wrote some pretty stupid stuff. Stuff that today, if it were ever to come back, it would bite me in the butt. I'd have to sit there and say, yeah, I was an idiot when I wrote that. Now, I had some other stuff I wrote that I'm still rather proud of. But there are some things I wrote in high school. There's stuff I wrote when I was in my early 20s that now that I'm in my 60s, it's like, yeah, I was kind of stupid when I wrote that. Or the times have changed. So, are there things that we need to hold people? Is there a limit to holding people responsible for what they wrote in high school or college?
Senator, when I was preparing and reviewing my materials for this hearing and for the process, I also have to admit that that writing was far from clear or articulate, and the poetry was definitely not good. Now, Senator, I don't make...
Do you believe we need to have a creative struggle towards redefining property, which is what you were advocating for?
That was something that I wrote 30 years ago, Senator, and in the course of just exploring law school and the ideas that came with...
Okay, so your flirtations with Marxism were 30 years ago, so let's go more recent. In 2020, you gave a speech entitled Reflections on Equity and Privilege, and you said, quote, "First, the world is wide enough for all of us. Privilege derives its power from the belief in scarcity, scarcity of money, natural resources, food, and power itself. The desire to control it all drives privilege. I want to suggest to you that equity, the idea of equity, rejects this model of scarcity." Now, that's Marxism in 2020. What did that mean?
I've never considered that to be Marxist, Senator. It's the idea that equal access, and in the context of the work that I do here...
So there is no scarcity, there are no property rights. Equity gives everyone an entitlement to each other's property. Is that right?
Not at all. And in the context of the work that I do on the bench, Senator, when you look at my record for all of these 16 years, you will find that I have upheld the Constitution and our case precedent.
Okay, well, let's turn to something else you wrote in the Wisconsin Women Law Journal. Again, this is your writing. The name of the article is Destabilizing Power and Rape, Why Consent Theory and Rape Law Has Turned on Its Head. You cited Professor Catherine McKinnon, who argued, quote, "Sexuality itself is a power web in which heterosexual relations per se are infused with violence and control, and, quote, most intercourse is rape." Now, her views are extreme, and yet, and when Senator Blackburn asked you about them, here at the hearing, when you want to be confirmed, you try to distance yourself from them. But here's what you wrote in the article. You embrace those views. You wrote, quote, "I employ the view that rape is sex in order to focus on the significance of consent in rape law. The Sex Act is a violation per se without consent. In order to properly align the consent doctrine in rape law with consent in other areas of law, non-consent must be presumed."
So every time the wife and I have sex, every time you and your girlfriend or you and your boyfriend or you and your whatever human being, adult over the age of 21, have sex, it's rape. Somebody is raping somebody. and going under usual standards that men can't be raped. Can't be raped by a female. Let me rephrase that. Men can't be raped by female. That the only person ever to be guilty of rape and always is a rapist is a man. And this judge agrees with that. The way I understand what he's listening to, what he's saying. What do you guys think? What do you guys think? Is he there? Is that what he's saying?
Do you believe that is a mainstream view that heterosexual sex is rape?
Senator, in that article, I was exploring different ideas and theories, and I was employing the hypothetical that you've just described to try to tease out a particular issue with respect to consent. With respect to your last question...
So you also quoted Professor McKinnon, who wrote, quote, "Sexuality is to feminism what work is to Marxism." Let me ask you again, what does that mean?
Senator, I was summarizing different theories that people were presenting, so that way I could explain them and then employ an analysis with respect to the issue of what consent was in the context of sexual assault back in 30 years ago.
I think your views are far, far out of the mainstream.
Women. Now, this same committee the same committee, well, they're getting ready to have their votes. Okay, where is it? That's Blackburn. Hers is too long for right now. Let's listen just prior to them having their votes on these guys. Ted Cruz has got one more thing to say here.
Senator Cruz?
You asked if people wanted to be recognized on. Well, I agree entirely with Senator Graham. The judges that have been nominated by Joe Biden have been extraordinary. They have been extreme. They've been so egregious, they fill me with a sense I could not have previously imagined having, which is I long for Barack Obama. Because although I disagreed with many of President Obama's judicial nominees, they were comparatively moderate when put next to the radicals that the Biden White House keeps putting forward. You look at Judge Mustafa Kasubai, his questionnaire and history, and you would be forced to conclude that he is a radical leftist, if not an outright Marxist.
When I told Trump about this, he urged me to get this message out to as many true patriots as I can.
Now, those are not my words. In one essay he wrote, Katsubai argued that the integration of Marxism with traditional economic theories of property, specifically that of Locke and Bentham.
Okay, Retro, I'm pausing here. Okay, I agree with you. These judges are getting more and more partisan. There's no question about it. They're getting, and part of that is because they're buying into the new far progressive left ideology. Hey, Johnny, by the way, good morning to you. You know, this progressive left ideology is becoming more and more mainstream. The ideas that we thought were going to die out when the kids graduated college have now become mainstream thought on the left. A prime example of that was recently a sitting senator wore a Palestinian scarf, and in interrupting or leading a walkout, her last words she said was "Free Palestine, free Palestine." At least she didn't say, from the river to the sea nonsense. But then she turned around and led her party out of the meeting room, and therefore there would be no quorum, and that was the end of what was going on. That is how badly the left has infiltrated and infected our country today. And Johnny, these judges, you don't know where these guys are sitting when they're running as a DA. The people don't know where when they're running as a DA, because nobody goes deep diving into what they wrote as college professors or college students. They don't deep dive into it. And the Soros money, how many of these DAs, it was known they were backed with Soros money. And the media does not go into what these guys have said. It doesn't make it, doesn't make it an issue. Remember, it's only a scandal if the media says it is. It's only a scandal if it's on the front page above the fold or the first 5 minutes of the newscast. If it's not there, it's not a scandal, regardless of what anybody else says. So but Johnny, yeah, that's on, now when I vote for people, I do that research. Okay. But most people don't. We're weird. We're strange. We're the outcast. We're the outcast because we take time to do this stuff. All right? Most working people don't. They rely on the media to do their job. They rely on the newspapers and your local Channel 7, Channel 13, Channel 3 news companies to do their research. They rely on your local state newspaper, whatever newspaper, is statewide, to carry the news and do that deep dive into people's backgrounds. They don't have time to do it on their own. They got jobs, they got families. Johnny, I do my research. You know damn well I do my own research. But the average American doesn't. They're out working, trying to put food on the table. You got the college kids and old retired farts like me who've got time to do the research. Most people don't have time to do the research. They're working 40, 60, 80 hours a week trying to put food on their table and spend time with their families. Not everybody's a damn governmental nerd like I am or you are. Okay? You see, and this is why, again, I don't want people to believe me when I say something about someone. All right? This is why I use congressional hearings. This is why I use videos of what they've actually said and put it out there to where you can hear the words out of their own mouths. John, you're right. And exactly how much of this is made of these hearings made the national news? How much of it? How much of what was said here made the national news? You tell me how much of this made the news. This is there. This was available. How much of this has made the news? None of it. Absolutely not one word of it's made the national news. Fox News, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, CNN. None of it has made the news. And all of it should have. And it should have been made the news. People should have been aware of what this man had said and done in the past and said and done as a sitting judge. Positions that he's endorsed. But because he was nominated by a Democrat and he holds the positions that the media once held, to be honest, it's not going to get out there because he fits the narrative. He's what they want. It's like those protests there in D.C., the attacks on the White House. One person being arrested, to my knowledge. One. Has the FBI announced that they've opened up investigations to arrest more people? No, they haven't. Are they opening up investigations? I seriously doubt it. Honestly, I was surprised that they're even at the one arrest. But I guess that was there to give them cover while we arrested someone. So, but yeah, you're right. I've spent 2 hours here trying to bring this to people's attention of what's going on. All right, me and my little voice. I'm doing what I can do to get the word out there, Johnny. All right, my little platform. I'm doing what I can do. What are you doing? Are you trying to get the voice? Are you dedicating a couple hours of your show? Are you dedicating time of your show of researching and looking at these videos from congressional hearings? This is how I started my channel because I watched the congressional hearings. Now, John, you know I like you. You know, Well, Johnny, let's see here. This is, I'm still under 500 shows, 500 streams here. When Trump was in office, I'm trying to remember how much streaming I did when Trump was in office. All right. I'll have to look back and see when I first started, streaming. Nah, not going to start measuring nothing there, Johnny. Okay. But I'm not willing to excuse behavior. All right. I don't excuse behaviors. But anyway, it's 11 o'clock my time. I've got to get ready for a doctor's appointment. We'll continue this later on. I've got more videos here that I want to show. Just heads up, okay, I will not be having a stream on Thursday because I've got to go and see my neurologist Thursday morning at 8:30 in the morning, be in his office. And it usually about 3 hour visit. Well, 3 hours spent in the office for a 5-minute visit. So anyway, I want to wish everybody a good day. Johnny, I'll have to get into that later on, man. All right? And we will talk about all this later. Everybody, have a good day. Enjoy yourselves. Be with the ones you love and love the ones that you're with.